Hello and welcome back to another episode of You Want to Do What. Today we've got Holly on and she's a software engineer. Hi, Holly.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. You?
I'm good.
Amazing. Let's jump straight in then, Holly. Do you want to tell everyone a bit about what you do?
Yeah, so like I said, I'm Holly. I am a Microsoft software engineer too on the Microsoft Search Assistance and Intelligence team. We're a global team, but I am actually based out of London. So what we kind of do is focus on bringing kind of intelligence and again, search assistance, all of that kind of stuff to various places within Windows and Edge. And we're really trying to help people kind of be their most productive, have their most impact, and really focus on kind of the good work that they're trying to get done. So I know my job is pretty variable from day to day. Like I've been working on, I think this is probably my fifth project of the year. I've never quite been on so many projects at once, but it does mean that I get to, tackle loads of different challenges and work across loads of different kind of tech stacks.
So, how did this all start for you then? Why did you decide to go into software engineering?
Yeah, so I've actually been interested in tech for quite a long time. So I used to play like video games, like predominantly like Xbox and PC games. And I did a lot of gaming with my dad actually. And so we would always be talking about kind of the things that we enjoyed and what we didn't like, what we'd like to see in later releases or what we would change. And that kind of got me thinking about, really the technology that makes up these games themselves. And so I was really inspired by that and wanted to, create the games that I was playing. So I ended up getting my first like proper start, I'd say. I'd done a little bit on my MySpace page, a little bit of programming there, but my first real programming was at a university called DigiPen, and you probably don't recognize that name, but you'll probably recognize a game that's come out of that university. So Portal,
Oh,
by
yeah. Okay.
it
Yeah.
was actually a student project
Oh,
by
wow.
students by DigiPen that ended up getting like bought out, and I think they hired the students as well, and then it turned into this big game that we all know named Portal. And so I actually have one of the original copies of that game.
How cool.
But so they were who kind of got me started. So I did a C++ games programming camp with them for like 6 weeks over the summer. It's a lot of fun, pretty intense. C++ is definitely a tough language to start with. But it was really a good kind of way of diving straight into the industry. And I ended up following that up with I did like a advanced placement computer science in high school, so like AP computer science. And that's where I learned like Java and some web development. And it was at that point that I decided to kind of, take the plunge, pursue it full time at university. I don't know if you can tell, I'm American. And so I decided to go 5,000 miles away from home to study computer science and did my internship at Microsoft. So like I said, moved 5,000 miles away from my home in Seattle where Microsoft is based so I could work at a place. So I could work at Microsoft in London. So my journey's taken me literally all around the world. But it all really started with this love of games.
How cool that your love of gaming with your dad has ended up in some sort of career that you love.
I know it was a great excuse to play games,
Yeah.
telling my mom, she's like, come on guys, that's enough for today. I'd be like, well, it's research and, computer development.
So how did this all turn from, you're studying at university to actually getting your first job in coding? Because it's a massively competitive space at the moment, isn't it? There are a lot of jobs, but there's equally a lot of people that want to get into it.
Yes, so this is something I really recommend to a lot of people, which is to apply for internships, apprenticeship schemes, grad roles. Like I personally think that is the easiest and best way to get into a company. So that's what I did. One of the reasons why I actually ended up moving to England was because of the integrated year-long placement year. So I really wanted to get a lot of industry experience. And the US obviously does like summer internships, and you can technically, take time off during the semester to do these internships, but it's not quite as robust of a system. And so I wanted um, I wanted to really to kind of maximize my opportunities for building these connections in industry. And so I chose a university that was very well known for having big placement schemes. So just applied through their system. Microsoft was the first place I applied to, and it was the last place I finally heard back from because it was quite a long application process. I think I had like 5 or 6 rounds of interviews.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a little bit of commitment there. But when I finally got that, email that was like, congratulations, you have an offer, like tears, it's just like
Yeah.
so excited. And, it's meant that, so like I worked on Paint 3D during my placement year, and then I worked on Xbox actually over the
Oh,
summer
wow.
following my placement year. So I did 15 months internship experience before I graduated.
How
And
was working at Xbox? I bet that was an absolute dream for you, isn't it?
oh, it's so cool. It was so
Mm.
cool. I mean, they really spoil their interns, and the projects that I got to go on was really cool. Like I was working on improving some functionality for kind of VR gaming, and my feature actually was like first deployed on Minecraft and
Oh,
VR. And so
wow.
I was like, I've gone for the biggest game platform or biggest game at the time. So
Amazing.
definitely pretty cool. And I can tell you now, it was a tough decision on whether or not I was going to continue working at Xbox in Seattle or move back to London to keep working with my current team. Obviously, I ended up back with my London team for a variety of reasons, but I always say to people, getting those internships is really, really valuable because I only ever had to do 1 round of interviews, right, which was my first placement year. And then my Xbox one, I got basically through, I just had a bunch of experience. And also I had a network within Microsoft, so I could interview directly with the partner lead at Xbox. And then I got my grad roles and all without interviewing because they just made me my offers. And so I think for people who are trying to look into it and who are students, I would recommend going through kind of the internship application process, especially because they hire for potential and growth and stuff like that.
So it sounds like you've got a lot of experience in a sort of really big breadth of different roles and sort of parts of the development sort of world. For
Mhm.
anyone listening to this and thinking, do you know what, I really want to get into this, what are some of the key skills that you'd recommend they start to learn now to be able to make themselves stand out?
That's a great question. And I think the classic answer is always going to be, especially for, a software engineering role, like you do need to have like pretty decent technical skills. I'd say a lot of the technical skills I gained while I did, university, all that kind of stuff. A lot of the skills I gained were actually on the job. Um, and because it was specific technologies, specific languages, all that sort of stuff. So definitely, obviously, like building up your kind of foundational technical knowledge. However, on the other side of that, I always call these sort of like professional skills. I don't really like the term soft skills because I don't think it gives them enough kind of weighting and
Yeah.
power. But a big part of working on a team is really this communication piece. People are usually the hardest and most complicated part of any kind of team working or working on a product. And so being able to kind of clearly communicate, know when you need to share certain information, knowing when to ask for help and how to ask for help. Like, I think there's definitely an approach where it's like, for me, I was quite nervous asking questions when I first joined, just because, a bit of imposter syndrome, the classic.
Mm.
But when I learned how to kind of frame my questions in a way that made me feel like I was still in control and I had tried to do things, I think helped me both get to the answer quicker, and also kind of build up those relationships and leave a good impression with those people on my team. And so I think it's definitely, don't neglect your professional skills, those communication, networking, all those sorts of things, because they certainly will help you stand out, especially in the tech industry where, as stereotypes go, those aren't usually people's best skills. So
That's come up a lot. We've had a few software developers on, and that's been a really key point that they've made, that usually, like you say, personality wise, maybe a bit more introverted, less likely to sort of stand up for themselves and communicate clearly to key stakeholders that make decisions. So if you can work on that, it could really, really benefit you in the industry, right?
Exactly, absolutely. And I think they only become even more important the higher up you go in your career, like because at some point, for the most part, people end up getting a little bit further away from the code as they become like more managers or whatever, not else. And so being able to have those skills and being able to kind of, I think for me, I try to foster and grow those now. I use them every day, but even just so that when they become really crucial, I have all of this practice experience and, kind of examples of when things went well and when things didn't go well. So it's worth investing into, that's for sure.
And for anybody listening, and maybe they don't even know the first thing about coding, is there anything you can recommend? Maybe some courses, maybe on something like Free Code Camp, where they can just jump in and have a go?
Yeah, so there's loads of great platforms that have a bunch of free stuff out there. So like Free Code Camp, like you were saying, I've used EDX before, which is quite a good one if you want to take classes from big institutions or big universities. So it's just like you can take a class from MIT on there. I've done one, I think, from Harvard, or there was another one that was done by Microsoft. So there's some big names there and they're all free. The only thing you have to pay for is the certificate at the end if you want one. Otherwise, they're free. My personal preference of platform has always been Udemy. I just think they're about 10, 15 pounds a course when they're on sale, which only buy on sale because there's almost always a sale. But I've always found Udemy to be quite a good one where the quality is quite high. The teachers tend to be quite engaging, and you can really see kind of what the curriculum is and the reviews of people to determine which ones are best. So depending on what you want to get into, I mean, there's a whole bunch. I have some links that I can share later, like maybe just include it in a bio.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Of the ones that I've done myself or, other people I know have done. So there's definitely some good ones out there. And I find that's a great way. Like whenever I end up having to teach myself something new, I also just go to Udemy and, start from scratch and kind of build up and practice alongside them.
And for you, what is an average day like as a software developer?
Yeah, so my days usually start around 9:30, sometimes a little bit earlier, especially in this pandemic. I can just kind of wake up and start working now. But usually start around 9:30 because I work with a lot of international folks. I get quite a lot of messages and emails overnight. So I tend to catch up with those right away. We do like the classic team stand-up where we talk about what we did yesterday, what we're doing today, and any blockers that we might have had. And after that, my days are pretty flexible and variable. So I'll kind of split my time between, writing code, architecting features, looking at doing kind of some like team management and planning stuff. So like part of my role now has increasingly been kind of supporting my wider team and kind of leading team meetings and stuff like that. So I'll do some of that kind of work. I've also been doing a lot more kind of work on the data side and telemetry, understanding that and kind of how our applications are performing. But outside of the technical stuff, it's also a lot of, one-to-ones with my manager or my mentors or getting involved in events. Like that's one of the nice things about Microsoft is there's a huge community out there. And so people are always putting on, different events and talks to kind of help each other grow or just connect with each other.
And, the future of software development is kind of always in the news, new breakthroughs in computer technology and AI and things like that. But what do you think are going to be some crucial skills to take forward as technology evolves and as software developing evolves?
Yes, this is an interesting one because I think about this quite often because the skills that, let's say, my dad needed when he was doing more computer science-y things early in his career are kind of different from the ones that I use now. And I think as we look forward, it's going to be like we know that Cloud technologies are massively growing. We know AI is a huge space that's increasing. Kind of in relation to that, data science is also a big industry that's growing. And so I would suggest to people to focus on the languages that are growing, understanding where the industry is heading, and think about which ways, like what value can a human provide that a computer cannot. So we talk about, like, there's loads of tools out there, and even GitHub released their own tool recently about, like programming AI or whatever. And so it's like, okay, more and more we're getting to the point where, like, technology can kind of help itself. We have so many website builders, but it's like, what kinds of things can you offer that maybe a computer will probably never be able to offer, or that unique values, like even considering things like ethics and AI, that's a space that a computer really is probably never going to be able to consider without human involvement. Those math skills and being able to analyze data is really valuable. I know for me, I've been trying to focus on the fact that I have breadth of knowledge as well as depth, but like breadth of knowledge, because the languages are constantly changing. So like for me, one of my concerns, and this is just like something I keep in the back of my mind, is because I work at Microsoft, there's a lot of Microsoft specific technologies. So like one of the languages I use is called XAML, which I suspect most people have not really heard of. And that's great because it gives me loads of internal Microsoft value. I have a lot of career security just because I have a skill that not many other people have. At the same time, if I end up leaving Microsoft for whatever reason, I suddenly have a gap in my skills. So I've spent quite a bit of time on my own time also learning other languages and staying up to date with my web tech and things like that. And it ended up coming around quite nicely for me, because one of the projects I ended up being put on was in React and TypeScript. And so because I had kept up to date with these other languages and made sure that I wasn't having kind of future-proofing myself a little bit, future-proofing my skills, I was able to jump on that project and deliver something in 6 months. So that's actually released to users now, which is kind of wild.
Yeah. And it kind of, we might have gone over this a bit, but it's always a key question for us. What kind of personality traits do you think have really helped you kind of thrive in this industry?
Yes, that's a great question. I think one of the things that's helped me the most, and this sort of goes back to what we were just saying, was it's really about having a growth mindset. You are never going to know everything in technology. And even if at one singular moment you feel like you do know everything, something probably is going to be released to the point where you don't know it the next day. Like there's always something else to learn. And I think being comfortable with the fact that you might not know everything, but you can figure it out, has been something that's really helped me, like especially when I was dealing with my imposter syndrome in my first internship. It was growing kind of trust with myself to know that I would be able to deliver something, even if I didn't initially know how to do it. And so I think that growth mindset, being comfortable with challenges and change, and really kind of looking for, what is the best experience for your users, is really going to be kind of a key thing here, that customer focus, again, along with, people skills. those always help. A positive attitude will take you far.
I think you bring up a really good point as well about imposter syndrome. I recently even had a bit of quite a bit of imposter syndrome in a separate sort of business dealing, and I was sort of, as I was walking to the meeting, thinking, what am I doing? Like, I'm not qualified for this. What's going on? And then it ended up going better than I could have expected. And it just shows you it's just your brain sort of panicking, but there's just no need for it.
Yeah, I think something that helped me once was, well, first, when I had my imposter syndrome, I didn't even realize that there was a term for it. So when I found out that there was a term, I was like, wow, I'm not alone in this. And what even kind of hit that home even more was when I heard the stat that 70% of people have experienced imposter syndrome like at some point in their lives. And
I'm surprised it's 70. I would say it's like, it must be like 90%. Surely everybody must have that feeling.
I would have thought so. Maybe some people are far too they're like, well, can't tell anyone. But I think it's reminded me at times that, like, especially if I'm feeling imposter syndrome, where I'm like, you know what, someone else in this room, or even the person I'm feeling like an imposter to, might be feeling like an imposter to me as well.
Yeah.
You know, it's like we are all people, and I try not to be super intimidated by people, just because we're all, you know, normal people. And I think feeling comfortable with the fact that, again, like, you know, imposter syndrome comes and goes. And I think it's often a good sign with the fact that you're pushing yourself to grow. You're pushing yourself to become better. You know, if you get too comfortable and you're not facing imposter syndrome, it probably means that you're not growing anymore, and it might be time for a change.
Yeah,
So
agree with that. Yeah,
I've
100%.
had to, I've really shifted my mindset on imposter syndrome from something that was really terrible for me to something that I think can actually kind of help me and help like drive my career.
Yeah, definitely. And for you, what would be the number one positive you've taken out of working in this industry so far?
Ooh, I think the number one thing for me that I just love is impact at scale. Like that to me is the biggest thing. I've always been incredibly passionate about trying to help. You know, I was a big, you know, like when I was younger, I was constantly thinking about the animals and the environment and all that sort of stuff. And I was like, how am I going to do that? So my love of tech comes from video games and animals. And I was like, I can help people on like using tech. And so I think it's quite nice that I can write something and, you know, it can be used around the world and help change people's lives, or at least make their day better, make them have more fun, connect with other people more, things like that. I think that's one of the most rewarding things, you know, when you hear that your code has been shipped to like dozens of millions of people.
Yeah,
Pressure's
incredibly
on,
cool.
but it's a really cool experience.
And on the flip side of that, what would be something that's less favorable or negative about working in the industry so far?
So this is an interesting one. And if you've probably interviewed any other women, I suspect they might have said a similar thing, but it is not always the most pleasant experience being a minority in tech. I think that to me was one of the big sources of my imposter syndrome, because I was like the only female intern. You know, it means that sometimes when you go into a room that you can just kind of tell people are doubting you, or you don't have that, like I describe it as the same kind of inherent trust. Like I feel like I have to prove myself before people will give me respect. Well, maybe somebody else, someone who looks more like them, has a similar background to them, they will just have that same kind of inherent trust and respect. Especially for me, you know, really bubbly blonde personality. Like it's just kind of like all the stereotypes are possibly kind of not in my favor. But you know, it's one of those things again where I try to turn these things that are negatives into positives, you know, use it as kind of fuel to know that, like, help push for greater diversity in STEM, and realize that, you know, the fact that I am one in a room, you know, means that I'm offering a different perspective or insight than maybe somebody else can. And, you know, there's been times where I've left feedback or raised bugs where I'm like, this seems a little bit suspicious. And, you know, I've read the results on those bugs later when they get resolved, and they're like, yeah, that does seem a little bit off. Thanks for raising that. And it's because, you know, they've had somebody that's come from a different perspective and kind of brought something else to the table. So, you know, it's not always the nicest, but I've also made a massive community of women in tech. And, you know, I think we're kind of united by the fact that we're all kind of pushing and struggling through the same things.
No, definitely on the right tracks, and it's an important message to raise. And what would be something that's probably not in your job description, but you have to deal with on a daily basis?
Ooh, Ooh, not in my job description. So I do a lot of work that I've taken on. So I don't know if I'd say I deal with it just because I have actively sought it out. But something that's not in my job description is I do a lot of work with the Women at Microsoft Employee Resource Group. So like I said before, there's like these loads of these communities inside Microsoft, and especially for groups that maybe need a bit more support or a stronger sense of community, things like that. So there's a whole bunch of them. I'm part of a few, but my biggest one I focus on is the Women at Microsoft group. So it's quite a nice thing for me to be able to both have kind of my more focused tech role inside of my team, but also get involved in the wider Microsoft and helping other people in their careers, and, learning, growing through some of the work and the events that I host for the Women at Microsoft group. So it's nice that my managers and, the company really respect that and understand that. And recently it's worked great in my favor. It was not the intention, but it's worked great in my favor where Microsoft has actually made contributing and promoting D&I as part of our performance. And so you are rewarded better if you actually support and promote D&I in whatever way that might be,
Oh, wow.
And so it's kind of nice to see that they've spoken to their values, or actually putting their money where their mouth is a little bit. So it's not quite in my job description, but it's something that Microsoft kind of allows me to do, and it makes me really happy doing it.
Amazing. And to sort of round off, would you still go into this industry knowing everything you know now?
Oh, absolutely. If anything, I would have tried to do it a lot sooner. I'm quite upset that it took me so long to actually start learning how to program, and even more so, especially now that I'm seeing all these like amazing young people being so driven to, want to get into the industry, but also, help other people get there. I keep thinking to myself, I was like, for ages in high school, I kept all of this stuff to myself because I was, these were bully things. And if I had just been kind of, brave enough to share this a bit wider, or create some group, or, do something, I could have had a head start on, or helped more people like earlier and helped them get on this path. So definitely no regrets. Or I definitely wouldn't have got into a different industry. I probably just would have tried to get into this industry even sooner.
Yeah, it sounds like you're super passionate about it.
Yeah.
And where could people find you? What you're up to? Any social medias or anything like that?
Yeah, so I guess the other part of my role these days is running the Her Hello World platform. So it's something I founded back in 2018. It's been a couple of years now. And for those who don't know about it, is basically a platform where I'm trying to democratize tech and career coaching to help underrepresented communities kind of enter tech and really thrive once they're there. So I am on Instagram and TikTok at Her Hello World. And I also have a website, also Her Hello World. And if you subscribe to my newsletter, then there's some good free stuff that you will get in return. But that's the best place to find me.
Amazing. Thank you again for coming on, Holly.
Thanks so much for having me. This was great.
Pleasure.